Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
And welcome to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. Let's start by talking again about the push to essentially ban vaccine mandates in Indiana. Lawmakers held their first hearing on that bill this week, a marathon hearing filled with passionate voices on both sides. News 8's Garrett Bergquist was there as well.
Hoosiers spoke for more than 4 hours, urging lawmakers to pass the bill. They say they and not their employers should decide whether or not they get that COVID shot. At times, raucous applause met workers like Jason Stockberg. He has declined COVID vaccines on personal grounds.
Fortunately, my exemption was accepted late last week. However, not knowing what the future holds is uncertain, and if my company will continue to honor my exemption as well as others that I work with.
Indiana lawmakers are considering whether to limit employer vaccine mandates. The legislation would prohibit them unless employers allow religious or medical exemptions. They also would have to cover the cost of weekly testing. The idea frightens ER doctors like Gabriel Boslett.
We are tired. We have been able to scale up ICU beds and ventilators, but we have not been able to scale up people. There are no more of me. There are no more nurses.
Those words of warning didn't sway the bill's supporters, who sometimes turned the hearing into a shouting match.
I am an elected member of the General Assembly doing my due diligence, driving up here to listen to people like you who are making fun of our institution.
I love this nation dearly. What I don't have time for is for people to trump the individual God-given rights of people in our state.
Workers like Stockberg, who don't want a vaccine, say it's worth the risk of unemployment.
If just 20% of those people lose their job because they will not get the shot, that's 650,000 people that will be entering the unemployment line, and I will be one of them.
Lawmakers did not vote on the bill today. We expect they will give this bill priority when they come back for the short session on January 4th. And once that session begins, lawmakers will have about 2 months to act on legislation before the mandated deadline to adjourn. At the State House, Garrett Bergquist, Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook.
Now, remember 1 week ago, Governor Eric Holcomb told us right here on All Indiana Politics that he wants to see the language of that final bill before he makes a decision whether he'll support it. At the very same time, lawmakers were holding their hearing on Thursday. Governor Holcomb talked about the spike in cases and again urged everyone to get vaccinated.
We noticed, the tick up during Thanksgiving, and obviously with the holidays around, it gets colder as the weather ebbs and flows and goes ups and down. You track that for one, and you track large gatherings. My chief concern is to make sure people know that we have the supply to get folks vaccinated before they end up in the hospital. Yes, we can treat you when you're in the hospital, but when you look at the overwhelming number of people going into the hospital, going into an ICU, and or worse than that, losing their life, they're unvaccinated. And I just want to make it just crystal clear that we have the ability to vaccinate you close to home. And that's the way to spend time, not safely with your loved ones this year, but for a long, long time from now.
Meanwhile, federal courts are considering the president's plan for an employer-based vaccine mandate. Our All Indiana Politics team asked Senator Todd Young if he believes Indiana businesses should be allowed to mandate workers be vaccinated.
We will not act in a similar fashion at the federal level. But look, it's a state legislature's prerogative. It's a governor's prerogative to do whatever they want to legislatively that is blessed by Hoosiers. So that's outside of my lane. I work on federal policy.
But do you believe the business should have that choice?
I believe a lot of things. But my beliefs as a private citizen are different than my objectives and my mandate as a federal legislator.
All right, coming up, dealing with gas prices in Indiana, the White House answers our questions about the decision to release oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserves. Next on All Indiana Politics. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we turn now to the political battle over higher consumer prices, including at the gas pump. The White House is touting a move to release oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserves as one way to get prices moving down again. Here again is News 8's Garrett Berquist.
And joining us today is White House Assistant Press Secretary Emily Simons. Emily, thank you for joining us. Are there any plans, given the situation at this point, to release any additional oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve?
Thank you so much for having me. So, of course, we're keeping all options on the table, but at this stage, we are not actively considering that option. We have started to see tremendous progress from the president's action that was coordinated with several other countries around the world to release some of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve already. And we are seeing that price drop already across the country. We have seen gas prices now at an average of about $3.30. And in Indiana, we're seeing it even lower than that right now, below even the 20-year average at $3.18. So we do hope that this progress continues, but we'll, of course, be continuing to keep all options on the table.
Since this decision was drawn more from a confluence of factors as opposed to a single acute crisis, such as an armed conflict somewhere, is there a possibility this could become a recurring policy?
Well, I agree with you. There are always many factors that contribute to gas and oil prices around the world. And that's why we're continuing to track this on a variety of levels. The president asked the Federal Trade Commission, which is an independent agency, to look into potentially illegal conduct that's happening at oil and gas prices. You know, typically what we would expect to see is that as crude oil prices drop, we'd expect to see those price drops happening also at the pump for Americans. That was happening much slower than we would have anticipated. And so the FTC is considering looking into that. That coupled with the SPR release are just two of the ways that we're tracking this.
A lot of the president's critics will point to the government's own data that would show that 50 million barrels only equates to about a couple days worth of oil use. This is more of a drop in the bucket. Why not instead encourage greater domestic production and greater oil infrastructure, such as additional pipelines, such as the Keystone XL?
Well, as I mentioned, there are a variety of factors that contribute to gas and oil prices around the world. We're continuing to keep many of those on the table. I won't speak further for the president on Keystone XL. His position has been very clear there. But we're going to make sure that Americans are paying a fair price, because we know that any price increase, whether it's at the gas pump, whether it's at the grocery store, can make a huge difference to Americans, and the president understands that.
So if I'm a driver in Indiana and I'm filling up my tank at the gas pump, how do I know that this is working? And how do I know that it's the result of this action as opposed to market forces independent of the president's order?
We can say, as I did say, that while we know there are many different factors, we believe that the SPR coordination is at least contributing as an important one. We're seeing right now that gas prices in Indianapolis are $3.16. That's below the $3.18 20-year average. So right now what we're experiencing is about on trend and even lower than average. So we hope that these decreases will continue. And we know that gas is one of the most important daily occurrences that Hoosiers face. And so we want to make sure that when you're going to the pump, you're paying a fair price, you're paying a low price, and that's what we're going to keep our target on.
Garrett, we have time for one last question.
And while we're on the subject of consumer prices, we now see inflation at its highest level in about 40 years. How do you bring those prices down and head off this argument that this inflation is President Joe Biden's hidden tax?
So what we are seeing right now are higher prices in the grocery store. And we know that this pinch on a family's budget can make a big difference. And the president is not standing by. He's taken these aggressive actions to ensure that people will start to see lowering prices. And we expect, as many economists do, that over the course of the next year, these prices will decline. But one very important aspect of this is meat. Meat actually is 25% of the factor of food at home costs overall. And what we're seeing is that some of the 4 biggest meat processors have record-breaking profits, especially over the course of the pandemic. So the president is laser focused on lowering prices for consumers, especially by targeting any corporations that might be profiteering by the pandemic. We want to make sure that farmers and ranchers are paying fair prices to meat processors and that consumers are paying fair prices when they go to the grocery store. So that's just one of the ways we're working on this. And the biggest one, if you're concerned about inflation, is to ensure that the Build Back Better Act passes Congress as soon as possible.
Thank
We're
you,
joined
Garrett.
today by White House Assistant Press Secretary Emily Simons. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Garrett, for having me.
Now, you heard Emily Simons talk about the president's Build Back Better plan. The president this week admits the $2 trillion bill is stalled, but that he believes it will eventually pass. And I want to take you back to our team's interview with Senator Todd Young. He spent part of this week attacking the plan for its impact on childcare. Young says the bill puts new limits on faith-based daycares and could cause family childcare costs to increase by $13,000.
Frankly, for years, we've had a problem with childcare costs. In fact, in the state of Indiana, the average household pays more for childcare each year than they do higher education. So this is an important challenge. It's one that I've addressed by trying to certify childcare providers and get more people into the workplace, which will bring down costs. But instead, what the Democrats propose doing in this legislation is increasing costs significantly, doubling costs by some measure, and then asking the taxpayers to subsidize that increased costs. It's asinine. It's ridiculous. It defies common sense, and this is why it must be defeated.
All right, coming up, vaccine mandate bill here in Indiana and what to do with the state's extra revenue coming in next year. Our political experts are ready to debate those next on All Indiana Politics. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday as we welcome back to the show Brian Gaddy, a Democrat, and Jennifer Hollowell is the Republican on the panel. Good to see you both. Happy holidays. Brian, I want to start with you here. What was your takeaway from the hearing this week in regards to the vaccine mandate bill?
Well, once again, the Indiana Republicans are showing they're not pro-business. They're quite anti-business. And the Republican Party is a long way away from Dick Lugar and Dan Coats. Even Mitch Daniels. They've become a party of culture warriors. And that's just really what that's really their stock and trade now. Because they want to push a bill that's going to tell Indiana businesses, Hoosier businesses, what to do. I mean, you can't get more anti-business than that. You can't get any more big government than that. You have to have the temerity to say we Democrats are anti-business, which is one of the biggest myths, and I'll be blunt, one of the biggest lies in American politics, that Republicans are so pro-business and we Democrats are so anti-business. This is truly the biggest encroachment of business I've ever seen in the history of Indiana politics. They're literally going to really tell Indiana businesses what to do, and it's just outrageous. And it doesn't. And we have to make sure it never becomes law. And I think Governor Holcomb's going to make sure it doesn't become law. But if not, we Indiana Democrats will keep talking about it and letting Hoosiers know
Jennifer,
this is not in the best interest of Indiana businesses, which means it won't be in the best interest of Hoosier workers.
Okay, let's get Jennifer in here to respond.
Sure. Well, first of all, it is Indiana Republicans who have made Indiana such a business-friendly state over the last decade, which is why we've had such a booming economy and incredible job creation all across the state. And frankly, it's also why Republicans keep winning. Now, this particular issue is really difficult because you've got a lot of competing interests, and we've got to figure out where the law is going to come down. So obviously, you have businesses who want to make the decision for themselves. Some of them are federal contractors and looking at potentially different rules based on President Biden's rules. But so we want to be able to obviously keep Indiana open, run a successful business. We also have individual liberties and people who want to make their own decisions and not lose their job over that. And so, what we are talking about is whether or not businesses can require an employee to have the vaccine or to be tested every week if they choose not to have the vaccine. And there are exemptions for the vaccination. It's not easy stuff. Legislators have sat through now, I think, 2 days of 7 hours each of testimony, and they've heard from Hoosiers of all different walks of life. And in certain industries, there's different opinions than there are in others.
Including, Jennifer, as you know, the folks in the medical community and also some business leaders who push back on this.
Yes, the Indiana Chamber of Commerce is against the Indiana Republicans.
The State Chamber of Commerce did testify in opposition to the bill. The interesting thing in the healthcare industry, which you mentioned, is that there are also opinions across the board. It is not as if everyone in the healthcare industry is vaccinated. You also have business owners who are saying, look, I'm okay with people making individual choices. I have to have people who are going to show up to work. This is not easy stuff. There's not a roadmap for this in the past. And so I think what we're seeing is let's let everyone have their say. Let's try to figure this out. And also for some businesses, it's a challenge if they have to pay for that kind of testing. And, is the state going to help pay for testing if this is going to be the law? So it isn't easy. There's not a clear-cut path. And I don't think it's fair to just kind of group everyone and cast it into extreme measures.
Right.
But there are serious questions. And frankly, for some of the folks who are in support of this bill, it's not necessarily about the vaccine or this vaccine, and some of these folks are vaccinated.
Brian, let me just get Brian in here real quick, Jennifer.
No, the problem is
Brian, hold on.
In the future,
Brian, hold on, guys.
So in the future,
Brian,
are we going to require people to
Jennifer,
do certain
hold on.
things?
Brian, one hospital, to Jennifer's point, there was a hospital healthcare system, Franciscan, this week dropped their mandate. So not everybody, to her point, is on board when we talk about medical community and the businesses.
The majority of medical professionals, not just here in Indiana, but across the United States, they are asking for us to be, asking for Hoosiers and Americans to get vaccinated. Republicans have demonized Dr. Fauci, and he's been calling for Americans to get vaccinated for going on 2 years now.
Right, but asking is not mandated.
Well, the point I'm making here is that this is something that medical professionals are asking and requesting Americans to do. But see, we've talked about this before, that employers have a right to make these decisions, and they don't need government coming in telling them what to do. Now, this is supposedly the pro-business party. They always say we Democrats are anti-business, but yet they want to push this HB 1000 that the Indiana Chamber of Commerce is adamantly opposed to.
Would you be okay if they wanted to push?
Hold
on. Would you be okay if the government said that every business should have their employees vaccinated?
What I would be okay with is that we are promoting that Hoosiers and Americans get vaccinated, and that we don't need the government telling businesses what to do or what not to do. That is what I'm talking about.
Yes, if they want them to be vaccinated or not, right? On both sides.
Well, if you look at this issue, the problem is the Republicans have politicized this issue, and we've got a whole swath of Republicans that think this vaccine is
yeah, it
wrong.
kind of seems like both sides have, Brian, to be quite honest, from outsiders looking in. Jennifer, last word. 30 seconds left. Go ahead.
Well, I'll say they were, against Fauci before they were for him. But I mean, the problem is there's inconsistencies in all of this.
You guys have been against Fauci all along.
Our way through it, and nobody has the right
years.
answers. And so I'm pro-vaccine as well. But this is a big, complicated question. I think we need to hear everyone out.
Especially when you politicize it. It's very complicated.
You would love to have.
All right, we'll leave it there. Happy holidays, guys. Good conversation.
Happy holidays.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Right.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can also, as we just heard, find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.